So, after that violent Paper Mario warehouse fire incident a few weeks ago, many more similar incidents have occurred. Now, you're probably surprised you haven't heard about this more, and I think we all know why the media is deliberately underreporting these at this point. The CEO of Five Guys, another minimum wage burger flipping chain, officially announced that after a busy weekend, he's giving a $3 million bonus to his employees. And his reason? He says he doesn't want anyone shooting him in the back, and said this in only a very half-joking manner at this point. And finally, the world's richest man, Elon Musk, took to Twitter to advocate for a universal high income, not basic, but high income, not too long after one of his Tesla warehouses got hit with a firebomb. Literally. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. But one thing is abundantly clear at this point. These recent violent revolutionary acts are causing serious panic amongst the boomer elites. And for the very first time seemingly ever, we're finally having a serious conversation about potential solutions. Let's get into it. Let's pick up right where we left off in the devastating $500 million in damages Kimberly-Clark warehouse fire, which you've definitely heard of by now. In my last video covering this incident a few days ago, a few people commented that this wasn't nearly as big of a win for the working class as we think. They said that insurance will simply pay for the damages, premiums will go up, and companies will proceed to just automate them away. And on the surface, it does indeed appear that this theoretically should be possible. But then something interesting happened, which might just backfire on the boomer elites in the most spectacular irony ever. You know how insurance companies deliberately, by design, make their profits by denying your claims? Well, it turns out this perverse maximal profit capitalist incentive structure might just eat itself alive in this instance. It turns out that the insurance company of this warehouse might be able to make a serious case to deny this claim. You see, the guy who burned down the warehouse was technically an employee of the company itself, an agent of the company. Every insurance policy has a clause which nullifies these incidents for the simple fact that, well, if they didn't, then you'd see a lot of cases of people simply burning down their own stuff to be able to collect the insurance money on it. Since this guy was actually a part of the company, it opens the door for the insurance company to make a serious case for denying this claim. Now, whether they'll actually pursue this or not is anybody's guess. But they certainly could, and this would set up the most brutally and poetically ironic insurance claim denial ever. Since this incident has happened, we've seen a lot more incidents that either haven't been reported or have been severely underreported. A very clever comment on my last video pointed out a very interesting and real possibility that could come as a result of all this. Honestly, I was expecting a video from you on this when I first heard about it. The only thing I would add is this is also a nightmare for the insurance company because unlike healthcare corporations that screw over the individuals, these insurance companies can't screw over another corporation. Instead, it would be interesting if insurance companies started refusing to insure companies that are considered a risk because they don't pay high enough wages. If we're lucky, the corporate system will cannibalize itself to the point that things get sorted out for us as a result. Now, based on the way this current economic incentive structure is set up, this is something that absolutely could happen. I don't think it'll happen overnight, but if it keeps happening as often as it is, this is definitely a possible future, theoretically speaking. Whatever happens next is anybody's guess. None of us can predict the future after all. But one thing is very clear. The boomer elites who have constantly screwed us over are absolutely trembling right now. And big, groundbreaking changes will be coming soon, one way or another. And speaking of that, this next story is a perfect real-life example of how this is already happening. You may have noticed we're getting very close to 50,000 subscribers now. So if you're new here and enjoying this content, definitely consider subscribing and helping us get closer to this big magic number as we ride this revolution and witness history together. Recently, something crazy happened in fast food corporate America, which you almost never ever see. In fact, this might be the first time I've ever heard of something like this happening. In lieu of an especially busy weekend for the Five Guys fast food restaurant chain, the typical boomer CEO actually turned around and split some of the profits with his employees, paying a total of about $1.5 million in bonuses to his workers. Now, Five Guys employs a total of about 5,000 to 10,000 workers throughout the United States, meaning each employee got a bonus of somewhere between $150 to $300. Obviously, this isn't all that great, and we still have a lot more progress to make, but it could help them pay a certain bill or make rent here or there. It's not nothing, and it symbolizes a good start. Although don't get me wrong, we absolutely still have a long way to go. Now, what was the reason he finally decided to pay up? According to his interview with Fortune magazine, he said, and I quote, "I didn't want anybody shooting me." Now, every article you find on the internet about this claims that he was just joking, but you know that saying that every just kidding has just a little bit of truth behind it? Yeah, I'd say this is the absolute perfect example of that. Here's an absolute game-changing revolution that this whole incident exposes. Gen Z is already waking up to how big of a lie, scam, and grift the entire concept of wage labor as a whole is. Wealth redistribution is seen as a scary communist word, but the very existence of wage labor itself proves that delusional boomers and corporate chills don't really have a problem with wealth redistribution at all. They only have a problem with it when it goes from the rich to the poor. When it's stolen from the poor and given to the rich, however, literally none of them bat an eye. If you were really getting paid all the wealth and value you deserved, you'd be getting a fair share of the profits as well. But no, whether it's a busy week, a normal week, or a slow week, they still pay you the exact same piss poor dog shit hourly wages. If you were really getting paid exactly what you deserved, you'd get paid based on how many burgers you flipped and not just how many hours you worked. The fact that you get the exact same $10 per hour, whether you flip 1 or 100 burgers in that time, proves that the entire hourly wage system is a total scam and a grift and the biggest form of wealth redistribution ever, stealing from the poor and giving it to the rich. And I think the Five Guys CEO may have just inadvertently opened Pandora's box here and exposed how big of a fraud this system is for everyone to see. Five Guys is not the only business to have ever experienced a busier than normal week. This isn't the first time something like this has ever happened, and it certainly won't be the last. It is, however, the first time, or at least one of the very few times, that the employees got to benefit from the profits that they themselves worked for and created and rightfully deserve. And here's the thing this also proves. After paying his employees this $1.5 million bonus, Five Guys didn't go broke, they didn't go bankrupt, they didn't go out of business or have to raise prices as we're constantly told. None of the supposed horrible consequences of paying people a decent wage actually happened. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth that no one really wants to admit. I'm honestly not sure this well-needed and deserved bonus happens if the general public sentiment wasn't so angry and heated right now. Sure, he can claim all he wants that he was just kidding, but given the convenient timing of how this happened not that long after the Luigi incident, I find it a bit hard to believe. There's a wise saying I once read from the game of League of Legends of all places, which is that oftentimes the threat of an ability can be even more powerful than the ability itself. Gen Z has already staged many epic, successful, violent revolutions all around the world right now, from Nepal to Morocco to Bulgaria. And with these latest incidents that have happened, the heated rhetoric everywhere, people openly celebrating these acts, the threat that it could erupt in a major Western country at any moment is very, very real. And the boomer elites are finally now starting to take notice. Extreme levels of inequality lead to crime and violence. The empirical evidence for this is very abundantly clear and really indisputable. And perhaps no one represents extreme inequality better than the richest man in the world by far, Elon Musk, who's currently approaching the status of becoming the world's first trillionaire. Now, if you follow my channel, you know that I'm absolutely no fan of this guy or any billionaire at all for that matter. So when I woke up in the morning, I thought that hell must have frozen over solid when I saw that he openly called for universal high income, not just universal basic income, but universal high income on his official Twitter account. Now, this comes shortly after his Tesla warehouse in New Orleans got hit with an incendiary Molotov cocktail, which, by the way, they still haven't identified the suspect for. Now, I want to be completely fair and objective here. This really isn't similar to the Five Guys CEO situation at all here. This could possibly just be a massive timing coincidence. And the reason I say this is because Elon has been calling for universal basic / high income for quite some time now, many years to be honest. However, there is one key detail that was different in this tweet compared to any other time he's advocated for UHI. Usually when he talks about this, he talks about it as if it's some distant future theoretical sci-fi possibility. He always talked about it in the future tense. We will need it one day. We're moving towards that as a society. I'm paraphrasing here, but that's the general idea. This last tweet after his warehouse got firebombed was the very first time I ever heard him talk about this in the present tense. Universal high income via checks issued by the federal government is the best way to deal with unemployment caused by AI. Keyword is the best way. Not could be, would be, or will be the best way, is the best way. This is, no pun intended, the first time he's spoken about it with such a present urgency. Now again, whether or not this is related to his Tesla warehouse getting Molotoved, the timing is definitely curious, but nobody knows for sure other than Elon himself. One thing is for sure though, he clearly sees and recognizes that mass unemployment caused by AI is a huge issue that needs to be addressed at this point. Even he is past this delusional boomer cope of just work harder, just study harder, it's your fault, you're just lazy. Now, the second part of his tweet is where it gets even more interesting. A big criticism of universal basic or universal high income is inflation. Won't this just make prices go up? Now, on the surface level, it does seem like this would indeed be the case, but Elon had a pretty interesting response to all of this in the second half of the tweet. AI/robotics will produce goods and services far in excess of the increase in money supply, so there will not be inflation. Not too long ago, I made an in-depth historical video about something very similar, so I have a very good idea of what he's saying here. 2,000 years ago, the ancient Romans implemented a form of proto-UBI for all its 200,000 male citizens in the peak of the Roman Empire. Every male citizen got a decent amount of free bread, olive oil, wine, and pork from the state in a program known as the Cura Annona. It was a wildly successful economic policy that led to the Pax Romana Golden Age and lasted for over 600 years. Now, one extremely interesting part of this policy, however, was that it somehow didn't lead to inflation. In fact, it actually brought prices down. This was because since everyone had their basic food security covered for free, they were not under the mercy of price gouging tactics used by modern corporations. If merchants ever tried to overcharge for food prices, the state could respond by simply flooding the market with their own grain, increasing the supply of goods and services, and keeping food prices cheap and affordable. To simplify what Elon is saying in layman terms here, let's say in a vacuum you have $10 and 10 pieces of bread. Now, if you only increase the money supply to say $20, now you have inflation as bread prices will simply double. If, however, you increase the money supply to $20, but also double the bread supply to 20 pieces of bread, you won't get inflation anymore. Now, with what AI and robotics will be capable of, we are possibly going to have 5 times, 10 times the amount of goods and services in circulation with how fast and efficient machines can work. This means that relative to the increase in money supply, inflation will not happen at all. People think inflation is just an increase in total money supply, but that's only half of the equation. So long as goods and services outpace the money supply, which will absolutely happen with AI and robotics, UBI will absolutely not cause inflation. And given everything going on right now, it definitely seems to be the only solution, not just for the economy, but for society as a whole, to not descend into total chaos and anarchy. Now, there is one last criticism about UBI that keeps coming up that I would really like to address because it's just the most cute, naive, and adorable thing ever. And that's this idea that, no, you'll be dependent on the state and on the government, and they're going to use it to control you, and they'll take it away if you say something they don't like. I wonder what world these people are living in which they're already totally unaware that literally all of their fears about UBI are already 100 times worse under our current model of being forced to get a job and be dependent on a corporation forever. The idea that a job or career is independence is a pure illusion. All you're doing is shifting your dependency from the government to a corporation. Do you think corporations won't fire you for saying something they don't like? Do you really think corporations won't use the threat of taking away your paycheck as a method to control you? Do you really think your paycheck from a corporation comes with no strings attached? Corporations will literally fire people for getting cancer, the most disgusting, reprehensible scumbag behavior ever. I'm sorry, but give me UBI from the government over a dogshit wage from a corporation that'll fire you for getting sick any day of the week. Oh, but you could just switch jobs. You could just work for another corporation. No, you can't. Not in this increasingly horrible and impossible job market. People are having to apply 700 times just to get an interview now. They can't even find their first entry-level job anymore. What universe exactly are you living in where they can just instantly get another second job at the drop of a hat when it's already impossible for them to even get their first one? Anyways, at this point, I'm glad we're finally getting to the point where we're actually discussing real solutions for the future. No more of this delusional boomer logic of just work harder and everything will be fine. And it's a shame it had to come down to literal acts of violence for the pressure cooker to build to this level, to where the boomer elite simply could no longer ignore the problem anymore. Now, the history books will probably say that the Gen Z revolution in the West began with Luigi Mangione. Recently, there was a major breakthrough in his legal case that could potentially allow him to walk away a free man in absolute stunning fashion. We cover this more in this video right here. Check it out. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.